And welcome everyone to God's Views on Political News. It's so great to see you back here and us being together after 3 long weeks. How are you doing, Bill?
Is that my name?
It was the last time I checked, so I'm not sure.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. It's I'm fine. Just we're still trying to play catch up from all of the stuff that's going on in the last few weeks. So
Yeah, everybody's been really sick and it's been going all over the country, and almost everybody I know has had, the flu, and I know your family had the flu, and it's just
yeah, everybody got touched by it except me and Alan. We were the only ones who escaped, but we paid for it another way. Um, but no, we had a lot of people, in our congregation that were really sick. We've had friends that are different places. In fact, we've got one friend. His daughter has been very, very seriously ill. In fact, I'm going to just go ahead and take the time to mention this. Her name is Yael Good, and she's in the Houston area. And she got the flu, but apparently the virus attacked her heart. And she is still in very serious condition. So when people pray, think of Yael Good. She's 21 years old. She's in a very, very, very critical situation, and we just want to keep her in prayer. So yeah, this flu has been, in my memory, the worst that I've ever experienced.
Yeah, it's been really bad. And the young lady that you're talking about, I've been praying for her. I've heard about her and I've been praying for her. And my group in the morning shows we prayed for her today. So I know that she's seriously ill.
Yeah, she is, and it's just too young to be facing situations like that. And I know her mom and dad are very, very appreciative of those who are praying for her. And I'm going to go ahead and say this too. I know they're facing an incredible amount of medical expenses, and so there are people around them that are trying to generate response to that particular need. And I know there's lots of people in need, but it's just been crazy this year.
Well, I know that they have a GoFundMe. I think that's set up for her, I believe. So maybe we can get that information out there.
I think so. Anyway, but her name is Yael Good. So
yes,
some people may know her father, Joe Good. He's been a teacher in some of the same areas as I for many, 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 many years. So
well, we do. I wish complete healing for her. So hopefully, that will be. Everything will be working out okay for her. And I know her parents are in a lot of stress. They need your prayers as well, but having to go through all of it. I can't even imagine.
I can't either. I sounded like a Kennedy just then. I can't either. Anyway, I can't.
I'm trying to be British.
I can't. I mean, when Beth and Allison were sick, it was, they did fine comparatively, but it's just really stressful just when you've got so many people sick like that. But for your daughter to be, anyway, let's just keep praying for them.
Absolutely. Now, I wanted to start off by talking about Iran. I think that we've heard a lot about what's going on and the protesters and what's happened over the last couple of weeks. We've kind of missed talking about that. And I wanted to, I think I wanted to start first to see how different people are reacting to everything. For example, let's look at how the protesters are reacting to things over, let's say, Trump and everybody else. So if Brandon has that tweet one, it's about this is from President Trump. Wow, the wonderful Iranian protesters refused to step on or in any way denigrate our great American flag. It was put on the street in order for them to trample it, and they walked around it instead. Big progress. Did you see that, Bill?
I did, and along with the U.S. flag was the Israeli flag, and they refused to trample upon that either. So that one backfired on the mullahs and the Khomeini and all those guys. So I think we talked about this at some point in times past, but if we didn't, we need to. And then it's not to take us off topic, but I think it's related. Some of the fastest growing congregations, churches in the world. It's happening underground in places like Iran. And when we talked about that, whenever it was, and sometimes past, I think we even got into the idea of, for the sake of those people and what the Father is doing in places like that, we might see some upheavals. We might see some changes going on, and really, I think that's what's at the bottom of this. I mean, I really, really do. That's what the whole issue is when it gets right down to it. But as far as the people refusing to walk on the flag and all, I not only were Khomeini and all these guys probably taken aback by that, but it seems to me that a lot of people here in America, particularly the left and the media and the people that just absolutely despise this president, were probably a little dumbfounded by that as well, because it didn't fit their mantra, didn't fit their agenda.
Well, and you think about that, and look how much we've been seeing lately. We've had the Chinese, who the protester, well, in Hong Kong, and we've had all of that going on, and how they are so respectful, to the to America, than more so than our own people in America. I mean, it's been amazing to watch all of
Yeah, I
that.
mean, with the flag and the national anthem, and yeah, I mean,
Yes.
it's if anyone's paying attention, and I hope they are, they can see what's really going on here in this world. And I'm hopeful that, as we've said many times, that Haman is building his own gallows. All these things that they throw at the administration and the president and people who support the president, and I think in particular people who are of faith, the more they throw at them to try to alienate and try to diminish and try to demean, it seems to me the more boards they add to their own gallows. That's the sense I have, and everything they try to do, it seems to blow up in their face in terms of what the truth is, as opposed to what they're pushing out there.
Hmm. Well, and it is great to see that. I mean, I think that, like you said, we're seeing I think in Iran, we're seeing like a regime change happen without the president having to do anything about it. It seemed like Obama really liked regime change everywhere, and President Trump is like, it'll take care of it itself.
What really struck me about this whole thing, going back to Soleimani and the drone strike and all the brouhaha because of that, um, I don't know that the president mapped this all out in his head, that if we do this, this will happen, and this I don't know that he had all that planned, but to me it seems like by him, first of all, taking decisive action, having some positions, some convictions about some things, and then taking appropriate action, i.e. Soleimani. Um, I'm going to go ahead and say it. It's like God's favor is upon that.
Yeah.
And things that no one probably could have foreseen are beginning to take place because he did what he was supposed to do, and others around him did what they were supposed to do. And of course, the Hamans and the naysayers and the accusers, they're coming out, and saying that this is going to create World War III and all this kind of stuff. And admittedly, for a few minutes there, it was kind of tense. But it just goes to show you that if you do the right thing and you take bold action, and particularly if it happens to be in concert with what God wants, some very, very miraculous things can happen. It's like, and it's apples and oranges, I know, but it's like Ronald Reagan standing in front of the Brandenburg Gate back in the 80s and saying, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Well,
Yeah.
everybody around him said, "No, don't do that. You'll incite something. You'll get them all ticked off." And he's like, "I'm going to do it anyway." And World War III didn't happen. In fact, within a year and a half, 2 years, guess what? That wall came down. Germany was reunited. All these things can happen. And by the way, that also led to the collapse of the Soviet Union, which then allowed Jewish people to go back to Israel, churches to be established, people to hear the gospel, all these things. And so that's what I feel in the air is going on here.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my view. Anyway.
No, I was going to say, that they didn't want Reagan to say that, so much so that the speechwriter took it out of his
Yeah,
speech,
yeah.
so he wouldn't say it, and he said it anyway. And it's like that was like pre-Trump, but that was, Reagan had backbone too, like Trump. I
Well,
think Trump may have more backbone, but
when you have convictions and you act on them,
hmm
you know, um, good things can happen. Positive things can happen. The story hasn't been written just yet. As far as you and I can see, everything is kind of unfolding day by day. It may not turn out the way we want it to turn out. I don't know. It just seems to me that by taking decisive action, removing Soleimani from the scene, it obviously sent a very, very strong message to those in Iran. And I don't want to get too far off topic and get into something you weren't intending to get into, but it seems to me that somebody on the inside in Iran had to have been tipping certain people off as to who is going to be where and when. And if that's the case, I bet you it's got a lot of those people in Iran running scared. So they're
yeah.
thinking, you know what, we claim that we can touch him, but he's already touched us and proven it. So he put them in a very, very precarious situation.
Yeah, what was my understanding that Solomon's men, some of them turned against him and probably told Israel, because Israel was working with us, of course, probably told Israel where he was going to be and at what time and all that. And then we were told from Israel and, went out and got him. And I think it's great. I mean, it's also so great to see the protesters too, that I guess they've put up, shrines or for Soleimani and big pictures and posters. And I saw a video where they were kicking that in, they were setting it on fire,
Yeah.
and especially all of this happened after the Ukrainian airliner went down, who, by the way, Trudeau is saying, hint, it's without saying it was President Trump. If there wasn't anything happening over there, these Canadians would be home in their beds. It's like,
Well, you're baiting me here with
yeah.
to say something about Justin Trudeau. But let's just say there's a difference in
Philosophy.
there's there are leaders who will take decisive action and challenge somebody to tear down a wall or take out a terrorist, and then there are those who wear bike helmets and ride bicycles, and
But he's growing a beard. He's trying to, look a little bit more the part, I guess. Not working, but
yeah, well, he's in Canada,
But it's Trudeau. What can you say?
I'm sorry, Canadians. He's all yours.
He's all yours, and they don't want him. Paul and Lori Normando said, we heard a report that the mosques are empty in Iran. Don't know how true this is. Like yourself, I've heard that people are coming to Christ over there in Iran very rapidly now, when Iran was a lot, the people of Iran, not the government, but the people of Iran were pretty much secular, from what I understand, for a very long time.
Well, my understanding is, back in the pre-Ayatollah days, it was pretty westernized, secular, but they've been under such oppression for 40 years now.
Can you explain what the Ayatollah is real quick? I'm kind of confused on that.
Oh, okay, that was not the voice of God. That was the voice of Brandon speaking. During the Islamic Revolution back in 1979, when they took, 52 or 53 American hostages?
52.
52 in the embassy, and this leader, Khomeini, from France, he was in exile in France. He was a very hardcore Islamic cleric. He came back and he established basically an Islamic republic in Iran, and he was the Ayatollah, which it's been a long time since I looked that word up, but my understanding is it's more or less a title assigned to a high-ranking Islamic cleric.
Basically, they're a bad group of people, right?
Oh yeah, very basically. That's putting it mildly.
Putting it mildly.
These are the people who imprison people who are dissenters. They kill them. They oppress
but they're
people.
Still like a governing body of Iran.
Yes, that's what's in control right now. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, read the news.
I listen to the news and I read and watch it, but I don't have time to keep up with all the terminology.
Okay,
There's so much out there.
Then pay attention to what we're talking about then.
So pay attention to what we're talking about.
I am.
But yeah, it's and it's one of the things that I learned over all of this happening, and it brought things out that wasn't being discussed in the news. That in Iraq, when they have that prime minister in Iraq, when Iraq fell in 2011, when Obama pulled out very quickly, the all of these people from Iran rushed in there, and Iraq is essentially now taken over by Iran.
Yeah.
And even the prime minister that's sitting there is there because Iran agreed to allow that prime minister to be there. But that prime minister spent a number of years in Iran, so he's more Iranian basically than he is thinking, like Iraq. And so, I mean, it's amazing, what's going on, and how that everybody's saying, well, Trump, he's doing this, he's doing that, and we want him to leave and pull out of the Middle East. We're in a bad position right now that if we pull out of Iraq right now, Iran takes over another country, although they almost all have it right now. And China has been coming in and talking with Iraq and meeting with them, which is essentially meeting with Iran. So we're in a bad spot.
Well, in that regard, yeah. I mean, it's my understanding that the reason we told them we're not leaving is because those who ask us to leave are really Iranian proxies. They're not really true representatives of the Iraqi people.
Right.
That's my understanding, anyway.
Yeah.
I don't get the classified briefings each morning to say that with any certainty, but that's my understanding. So, it's all these things can get so complicated, I guess. I do take heart in the fact that the president has not shown that he is interested in getting into these long-term, as he puts it, endless wars. He seems to take steps to remove Americans out of harm's way if he deems it necessary. So, I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt in some of these decisions based on what I've seen in times past. I do hate to see any Americans put in a situation where their lives are on the line if there's not really some genuine threat, to America, to our interests. But, there are other people who made decisions many, 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 many years ago that put us in this situation right now.
Right. And there, we have a situation where they killed one of our American contractors, and they went against and tried to strike our U.S. embassy in Iraq. To me, that was all the reason that you need, even though the Democrats are now saying, oh, well, the president doesn't have that power to do so, blah, 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 on and on and on. He does. It's an imminent threat because they attacked our embassy in Iraq, and those were Iranians. That was not Iraq.
I'm just amused at how all of a sudden some of the Democrats are so concerned about the separation of powers. It's amazing to watch. Now, mind you, I'm one of those people who believe that if we're going to declare war, we need to do it the way it's supposed to be done. We're supposed to take it to Congress, and it's supposed to be done the right way. I'm not against the notion of if we're going to declare war. However, people made decisions a long time ago. Decades at this point, that have put us in the situation that we're in, i.e. Iraq, Iran, and all these kinds of things in the Middle East. And so, I think for the most part, Trump has done pretty well handling the hand that was dealt to him.
Oh, yeah.
Barry Goodson says, it seems we're all caught between a rock and a hard place.
Ba-doom-doom.
Oh, he can tell he knows Bill. No, I'm just kidding. Let's look at tweet number 2 if we can. And this is what President Trump had to say about what the mainstream media is talking about. He said the fake news media and their Democrat partners are working hard to determine whether or not the future attack by terrorist Soleimani was imminent or not, and was my team in agreement? The answer to both is a strong yes, but it doesn't really matter because of his horrible past.
Right.
Was there ever anybody who said about bin Laden, oh, should Obama have done that? Was it imminent? Da, da, da. I mean, nothing.
No, and that's what I'm saying. All of a sudden they're concerned about making sure we do this according to the Constitution and the precedent and all this kind of stuff, when they have long abandoned, those guiding principles and have, my view, Congress, and not just this Congress, for a couple of decades, have long ceded their responsibility to the executive branch and let the executive branch do certain things that they should never have been able to do. And that started long before Trump. That started long before Obama, for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
This has been ongoing. But now, all of a sudden, that we've got someone who's taken some decisive action and in the process is making them look like a bunch of fools. Now, all of a sudden.
Which isn't hard to do.
Well, these days, this is true, But, I mean, it seems to me that everything he does, that they seize the opportunity and going to try to, make him look foolish, and they come out with egg all over their face. I mean, Pelosi going on with George Stephanopoulos and talking about, trying to diminish the particular protesters that were coming out against their own government in Iran after this Ukrainian airliner was shot down. I mean, she looks completely foolish.
And let's go ahead and show that. We have that in video 1. So let's show that now about what her little interview with George Stephanopoulos.
We get there. We're seeing now demonstrations in the streets of Iran against the regime. Do you support those protesters, and would it be a good thing if they brought the regime down?
Well, the protesters are protesting, as I understand it, this brand of protesters about the fact that that plane went down, and many students were on that plane, and these are largely students in the street. I think the Iranians should have not had commercial flights going off when there was.
They're calling at the regime for lying. They're saying death to Khomeini as well.
No, well, whatever it is. But the fact is this: there were protesters in the streets before against the regime. After the taking out of Soleimani, there were protesters in the street joined together, as you know, against us. That wasn't good. Taking down this plane is a terrible, terrible tragedy. And they should be held accountable for letting commercial flights go at a time that was so dangerous. But there are different reasons why people are in the street. Of course.
Here's what jumps out at me about this whole argument that they've been making is, okay, she said they shouldn't have been letting planes take off during this very dangerous time, as if there was missiles going back and forth from Iran to Iraq, from Iraq to Iran. Everything took place over in Iraq, a totally different country, and just in a very, very small, limited, operation. There wasn't some full-scale war where shots are being fired, missiles are going off back and forth between two countries. So it's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. And to think, too, those people that were, that showed up for Soleimani's funeral, those people, most of them were forced to be there. And also, I want to know who was on that plane too. Something, I guess my gut's telling me there may have been somebody on that plane that they didn't want to talk later on. Maybe some people involved in all this. And it was just so easy. I mean, why would you allow a plane to take off when there's been activity like that in the area? It's just crazy.
These are questions we'll probably never know.
No.
But my thing was, why were there so many Canadians in Iran, going to Ukraine? That was like, okay, that's kind of weird.
I know.
Anyway.
It was really strange. Now, Tim said Pelosi, well, whatever it is. It's kind of like Hillary's, what difference does it make? Linda said airspace was shut down all around. The blind leading the blind. And Tim was saying Trump wants the Iranian citizens to overthrow their own government. And that, again, as we talked about, that would be the best thing for them to do, because this way you won't have a president who comes in there and tries to change things. You'll have their own people, which is what it should be. Then Robin said they're protesting because they are tired of a dictatorship. They want freedom.
Well, if that happens, they need to set their own course, and they need to be the ones to make it happen. Absolutely. I don't believe that we need to go in there and tip the scales one way or the other in any situation. But unlike, the previous administration, I haven't seen this one do that. I think the steps that have been taken have been to largely protect Americans and American interests. Whereas the previous administration, number one, when Iranians were in the streets protesting their government and looking to the West, and particularly to the United States under Barack Obama for support, they got none. And that, at least by default, gave the Iranians the green light to squash it, which is what they did. Whereas when it came to Libya, when it came to Syria, we most definitely got involved with regime change and going in there and trying to tip scales one way or the other. And as a result, we've got a mess in the Middle East. So anyway.
I know. Well, and that's what people forget. Obama put us in Syria because he wanted to get the leader of Syria out, Bashar. He wanted him gone. He wanted to change and put somebody else in, who I don't know, but that's what he wanted to do. So Elizabeth wanted to know, is this the only plane to take off during that time?
I have no idea. It's the only one that got shot down, as far as I know.
Yeah. So I think it was. And I said Bashar, I meant Assad when I said that.
I know what you meant.
So there's so many people's names to remember that, just not like Susan and Bill.
Yeah, well, Bashar Assad. So I know what you meant.
Yes, kind of put that all together. Yeah, and let's talk about too. How in Iran they denied having done it in the first place, and then I guess when it looked like they can't get out of this, then they're like, yeah, we did it, but it was unintentional. And now they've arrested some people.
Who knows whether it was intentional or not. I mean, it's kind of hard for me to believe that you see if you've got an aircraft in your sights, it seems like somebody's going to give an order to confirm to take it down.
But wasn't it odd that somebody was filming that at the exact time? And maybe it was just they were filming the sky and that just happened to be there, and they thought it was
Yeah, because we
incoming.
often do that when we walk out in the middle of the night and we start filming the sky. Yeah.
Especially when there's a battle going on too. I don't know. The whole thing is suspect, but we'll never ever know what happened exactly. And even if we did, nobody will tell us about it in the mainstream media.
Well, if you want to really put your tinfoil hat on, here we go. With this. What was it, a gymnast or some Iranian Olympian, a female?
Yes.
Has defected.
Right.
Right, and sought asylum.
Just a couple of days ago.
Right. And I've heard tell that there are people that were close to Soleimani who have disappeared. There are a bunch of them have been arrested. It kind of makes me wonder if there wasn't someone on that plane they didn't want to leave the country.
Yeah.
So that's my tinfoil hat contribution there.
Yeah.
So.
No, but it could, that's kind of like what I was saying a minute ago. I mean, it could absolutely have been that way. Now, Elizabeth said in 1988 was the Iran flight shot down, unable to ID to U.S. military as well. Payout was over $200,000 to estates. So, I mean, there have been so many different planes shot down with people on them that it looks like, it could have been something. Even our own a former president was accused of kind of, as the tinfoil hat land talking about it. But sometimes, what used to really be really tinfoil type land it's no longer that.
It's everyday occurrence now.
It is. It's kind of like normal stuff. So.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk a little bit more about, let's sort of switch to Israel a little bit now. There's rumor again about the fact that the deal of the century is going to come out and be revealed like any day now. We've been talking about this for about the past 2 years, and it's.
No, can I correct you?
Sure.
We've been talking about the deal of the century for the last 2 years, but
Yes.
we've been talking about peace deals coming out for
Forever.
30 years.
Yeah.
So let me just kind of put this in context, okay? All right,
Yes.
continue. I'm sorry.
Well, this one is supposed to be the deal of the century. And, it's the one that about 2 years ago, we talked about bringing it out. We were going to wait until after the election of Netanyahu, and then we were going to bring it out. And then we had a second election, and we held up. And now we're coming up on a third election for Netanyahu, which is March 2nd, I believe. And we have Benny Gantz, I believe it's Benny's his first name, Benny Gantz,
Mm-hmm.
who's with the Blue and White Party, and he's not against the plan. He's open to it. He hasn't heard about what it's about, but he's open to it. But people are saying, do you really want to bring this out now? And they're saying, well, President Trump kind of wants this to come out before the March 2nd election because of the fact that if we have the election in March, it may not be decided really until possibly May who is the prime minister. So we need to get this thing out now because May is a little bit too close to November, our own election, and we don't want to have anything that looks bad for the president. A lot of politics.
A lot of
and stuff
politics,
there.
yeah. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. I'm having been involved with Bible study and particularly eschatology and prophecy for a very, very long time. I don't get too worked up about these kinds of things, to be honest with you, until it actually happens.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying there isn't a plan, and there have been some reports have come out that what's contained in it and what it would actually affect. And from what I've heard, some of it anyway, I'd be very, very, very surprised for the Palestinian Authority to agree to it. But
they're not going to. They've
know.
already said without even seeing it, we're not interested.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it will benefit Israel, supposedly, that it's going to be something that's going to be very much, it's not going to split Israel. It's going to give them a lot of control. And so that's why Trump is thinking, supposedly, allegedly, that this is going to be a really good thing for Israel, be a good thing for him, and America seeing what he's done, another positive thing for Israel.
Well, again, excuse me, if what we've heard is actually contained in it, my understanding is basically if one side decides that we're not going to do it, well, then the United States is no longer going to give you any support. So if the Palestinians say we're not going to go along with this, well, then that
Right.
that says, well, okay, well, we're not going to give you any more money. Which, by the way, considering where they take and put that money and how they use it, I would be completely good with that.
Oh, me too.
Yeah. It's just kind of like that. What was it that how much cash arrived in Iran on a pallet? 1.7
150 billion.
Yeah. President Trump was absolutely right. That money funded the missiles that they've been firing at us and
the attack on our embassy.
Exactly. So this is what's been going to the Palestinians hasn't been doing what it was designed to do. Pardon me, I'll have to cough again.
Yeah. And they're saying that they think that this plan, if anything, it will have Israel annex parts of the West Bank and maybe all of the major settlement blocks there. So, and then have a little impact on the elections, they think, because the Palestinians aren't going to have anything to do with it. But again, and that's it's kind of hard to understand what's going to really happen because there are times when the president said, Israel and Palestine need to decide this themselves. But it looks like, from a long time ago, Palestine is saying, forget it. We're not interested. We're not even going to talk to you about it. So is the president's stance about that, is that changing? And maybe so. Maybe it is. Just saying, if you don't agree, we'll cut off your money and maybe you'll change your minds about it,
Well, I don't know that one necessarily... I don't know that cutting off our funds is saying that we're going to make something happen, between the two of you. It just seems to me to be saying that, look, if you're not interested in long-term peace, then what are we spending our money on?
Right.
That to me is a totally different issue. I understand they go kind of hand in glove and they're connected, but it's not, I don't think that is trying to push them to do something that we want them to do necessarily, as much as it is us being kind of practical and prudent about where we spend our tax dollars overseas. And why do you want to give it to people who are going to be, committed to war and to terrorism and those kinds of
killing
things?
Israelis.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
we need to remember that in the Gaza Strip, Hamas is the government.
Yeah.
And whether or not the people in the Gaza Strip did this of their own volition or at gunpoint, I don't know. It's probably a flip of the coin, but they voted for Hamas to lead them. So that's what you're up against. That's what you're up against. Now let me say this: there are some very, very good people who, non-Jewish people, Palestinian, if you will, who live in the so-called West Bank, who live in East Jerusalem, who live in Nazareth, who live in places all over Israel. People who just want to raise their family, make a living, live in peace without all the other stuff. So when I say something about the Palestinians, I'm not just, painting everybody to be the same thing. Nevertheless, the people that are representing them and have continued to represent them since Yasser Arafat have always said one thing and did another when it comes to making a true and lasting peace with the Israelis.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, President Trump has been very successful at convincing countries, look, get in on the good things that we're doing here, and that other countries are involved with the United States, and they've been profiting by that, benefiting by it. Get in on it with us and work with us, and we'll help you be successful and help your country and your people benefit. And I think that's what he is trying to do with Palestine. If they say no, we're not interested, then he's going to say, well, like you said, if you're not interested, we'll just walk away, and you can take it or leave it, type thing.
You and the Israelis work it out then.
Exactly. And so I think it's all a positive thing. Let's see. Tim said all the Palestinians have ever done is make war. They've never been satisfied, and in my mind, never will be. And so Gonzalez said, is this a path to the peace before the tribulation that scripture prophesies about? Is Trump being used by Yahweh for this? Just a thought. And we've kind of talked about that before. Is this, could very well be, and maybe it isn't.
Some of those things I will just wait until we actually see something that's official.
Yes.
And then make an assessment, because right now we would just be speculating about something that we haven't actually seen. So,
yeah.
Do I believe he's being used by God? I do.
Yes.
I even leaders I don't particularly care for are being used by God. God raises up, God brings down. He uses people for his purposes. I just believe that in Trump's case, what I've seen so far is that he is using him, number one, to expose just how deep the corruption in American culture goes, and the government, and that's one thing. He's used Trump to shine a light back on Jerusalem, that this is a favored city, that this is the city that is the capital of Israel, always has been, always will be, and those kinds of things. So, and he's using him, as far as I'm concerned, for very positive purposes, and is it setting the stage for other things? Could very well be, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm really interested. Last week when you weren't here, I was talking about the evangelicals for Trump, and I'm very excited about who's involved in that, and the fact that that pastors are getting involved, that they see, and it's becoming more clear to them, that what God is using President Trump to do.
Yeah, I saw a little bit of that. Saw some familiar faces there. But yeah, that's. I think that a lot of people like me, who, when Trump announced, thought, are you kidding me? The you're fired guy, and the guy that's been married 3 times, and it's, he's this, he's that, he's vulgar, he's profane, he's brash, he's arrogant, and all these things. And thought, no way, there's no way I can support that guy. And then he gets in and he starts doing things that, wow, he recognizes Jerusalem. He is trying to defend my right to worship as I see fit, and not
pro-life.
You're right, be pro-life, and actually do some things that are common sense. In a day when common sense isn't so common, and so it's not been his words, it's been his actions that have won me over, and garnered my support. And I dare say, Susan, that there's a lot of people like me out there. There's a lot of people who felt the same way, but now they've seen what he has done. You know them by their fruit. This is not to ignore. He has a personal you know, he has a personal thing with God that he has to work out on his own. I'm not getting into that. I'm
Like
just
the rest of us.
Right, exactly. But on a national scale, his fruit says that I can get behind this, and I'd be stupid not to. So, yeah, there's a lot more people, I think, that are in the evangelical category that are probably going to come out very, very adamantly in support of the president, even more so than in the last election cycle.
Well, when you have a pastor from California, Pastor Jack Hibbs, that is, from California, that is part of that Evangelical for Trump team and has, talked about all the positive things that he experienced when he was there with Trump and how he believes in Trump and how people will say to him, well, I can never vote for Trump because he's immoral. And Pastor Hibbs is like, yeah, we all are, so it's kind of like,
Yeah.
you can't vote for anyone then because everybody's immoral. And so, but it lets people know that David wasn't perfect. Nope, even who was in the biblical times, or who is today? Nobody is.
Well, I don't want to get too much into this today, but God deals with individuals in a way, and He deals with nations in a way.
Yeah.
And individuals pay for their sins, and nations pay for their sins. I don't think that Donald Trump is going to be excused of his guilt unless he does like everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
He goes to the Father and says, I acknowledge my guilt and my sin, and I want you to forgive me. That's the way it works. At the same time, someone like him or whoever can be in a position nationally and be used by God to do things on a national level that can have a totally different outcome. It's to serve God's purposes. There was a time in my ideal, I wanted to be an idealist and thought, it'd be great to have, a believer who's a very strong believer, very outspoken believer, running this country. That probably is never going to happen. And so we've got someone, though, and this again does not get into his personal relationship with God. I don't know what that is. Won't pretend to know what it is. But what he is doing, the things that he is causing to happen, these are things that I can get behind and support because they are righteous. To defend life is righteous. To enforce laws that protect life, whether it's abortion issue or whether it's the border issue, the same principle applies. You enforce the laws that are there in order to ensure and to protect life. And then where the border is concerned, for instance, you want to come here? Sure. We're going to know who you are. We want to know what your interests here are. Are you coming to hurt? Or are you coming to help? That's just common sense. That's biblical as far as I'm concerned. And then where Israel and Jerusalem are concerned, and on and on and on. Those are things that are righteous, and those are things that I can support. And I do believe that believers should, really, really, if they have a negative view of Trump, they really need to take another look at this thing. And remember, it's God who raises up, and it's God who brings down.
Absolutely. Now, Brenda Liz agrees with you and says scripture says we judge by the fruit. And as you pointed out, there's so many things that Trump has done that adheres to the biblical principles. I mean, I'm not talking about his personal life. I'm talking about what he has done to benefit the American people, and not only the American people. I think he's benefiting nations around the world. I mean, I really do. His impact is farther than the United States, much farther.
Well, look, I mean, one day America will have to answer for its sins. There's no way around that. Right. Okay? If we as a nation go unrepentant, we will have to answer for our sins. But here's the thing. If America goes down, it's not just going to be America that goes down. It's going to be a lot of other people going down. You think of, the Titanic, an ocean liner. It's not just the people who are left on the ship that are going to go down. It's anybody who's within range of that sinking ship. The suction of that sinking ship is going to pull them down too. So, all these people who want to see America's demise, and this includes the Antifas and the 20-somethings that, you know, live in their mother's basement, who think they're entitled to everything, and they want to see this capitalist society go down the tubes. They're, I guess, too ignorant to understand that if it goes down, they're going down with it, and a lot of other nations are going to go down with it, and then there's going to be chaos. There's going to be a power vacuum. So it's not a pretty scenario, you know, to consider what happens if America goes down. So, look, I'm one of those people. I mean, I know that I'm a citizen of another kingdom. I serve a king who is going to rule and reign from Jerusalem, the Bible says, and I'm looking toward that day. In the meantime, I'm all for making sure that where he's planted me, that I'm doing everything I can to make sure everything is where I can continue to do what I'm supposed to do. That is to be a light in the darkness, to be the one who bears fruit that attracts others to get on board, you know, his kingdom, to become part of that nation before all these things really do hit the fan. So I'm looking at it that I hope Trump is in there for another 5 years, and that he continues to do these kinds of things that give you and me and others opportunity to do what we were placed here to do by our king. And if it's his will for it to go beyond Trump and into another, you know, administration that would advance these kinds of things. But then if it doesn't, you know, it doesn't. Anyway, I'm rambling.
No, but very good points that you make. Now, I want to talk also about, this week we had another something happened under the currents. We've had a lot of problems with the FISA court. We've had a lot of issues going on about, all the surveillance that we had on the Trump campaign, and all those people with the FBI allowed for all that to happen, going to the FISA court supposedly and getting applications and warrants signed based upon false information. I'll just put it simply as that. And then we had the FISA court that came out the other day and appointed David Chris, who is going to oversee and make sure all of the things that the DOJ said needed to be done, all the reforms that needed to be done in the FISA court, that David Chris was going to take care of that. This Obama appointed guy.
Isn't that the fox watching the hen house?
It is. I'm telling you, it's like, come on in. But now this guy, let me tell you a little bit about his background. He did work under the Obama administration, but he also worked under the George Bush administration. But when he was under the Bush administration, he was all for, the Patriot Act and surveillance and things of that nature. So you got a guy that's he's pretty much also come out and said he was for Carter Page being surveilled and all this other stuff happening. So he's pro surveillance. Don't we have anybody else in the entire United States that is sort of neutral on these things that could come in and actually make reforms and you'd feel comfortable about it?
Well, I mean, you're going to have to go out beyond the Beltway to find them, and as far as his connection to the Bush administration, so what? I mean, I read something the other day that George Bush and Michelle Obama are pretty tight buddies, and
it's true.
That doesn't give me warm fuzzies.
No, it's kind of like the Bush family adopted the Clinton family and the Obama family. So I don't know what that's all about, but they've gone Democrat is what they've done.
Well, it doesn't give me warm fuzzies, that's for sure.
No, it doesn't. And this guy, and here's a couple of things that were said about the appointment of this person. Devin Nunes said that the appointment was shocking and inexplicable. It's hard to imagine a worse person the FISA court could have chosen outside of James Comey, Andy McCabe, or Adam Schiff. And he makes a lot of sense there. Sarah Carter, a great reporter, said it's a ridiculous choice. The FBI lied to the FISA court, and to help make sure that doesn't happen again, the FISA court chooses an FBI apologist who denied and defended those lies. The FISA court is setting its own credibility on fire. I don't think we should have a FISA court. That's just my opinion, but
I'm beginning to think that myself. It sounds like it's just government overreach to the nth degree.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what else you call it. Now, Linda said, Susan, I want to ask how you do it, spending so much time following politics. You know, it's kind of like in some ways, Linda. Some days I'm like, I don't know why I'm doing this or why I do.
You ought
Uh,
to you ought to see her bills from the therapist. I mean, it's just outrageous. I'm kidding, joking, I'm
Therapist,
joking.
heal yourself.
I'm
No,
joking.
but I don't know exactly, but for me, it's like I do this because I feel like I'm a watchman on the wall. I really do. I feel like God has, I have a law degree. I have a therapist. I'm a therapist, licensed therapist, a degree in that. So I just feel that God prepared me for a time like this. And part of it is looking at what's going on in the world, understanding the politics of it is what I got from my law, being in law and being an attorney, a former attorney, and also understanding people and being a therapist and kind of understanding and reading people and seeing what's coming in certain ways. So all I can say is God is doing this and helping me through it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to put up with all this and 24/7.
Okay, well, you have a logical path that led to this. You studied
Yes.
law, therapist, and all these things.
Yeah.
Before I got into ministry, I sold paint. So how did I get into this? I mean, how did I end up? Anyway.
Well, you were called. I mean, and that's what I feel like is happening for me. Like God is saying, "Go do this," and there are days where I say, "Can I do this one more day in politics?" And God's like, "You need to get back out there." I mean, it's weird, I know, but
Well, someone has to talk about it in a hopefully balanced way that
yeah,
brings some hope to the very bleak situation.
yeah, I know. And again, it's a bleak situation if you look at it through the eyes of us on earth and if you're in the world, right? But it's not bleak if you see that this stuff has to happen in order for God's return to happen and for us to, move on to a better place.
Well, I'll go back to something I said earlier. All the stuff that's going on in Iran and involving the U.S. and everything.
Hmm.
When all the smoke clears, I am willing to say definitely that it will be because we'll see this great outbreak of not only freedom, but people coming to the Messiah of Israel, coming to the God of Israel in in these places, in Iran and other places. And one day it's going to be Saudi Arabia too. I mean, there's
Yeah,
crazy, I mean, good things, but crazy good things going on right now where Saudi Arabia is concerned. And
absolutely.
and so what we as believers need to keep in mind, as much as we stand against and oppose the tenets of Islam, particularly those that seek to kill those that they don't agree with, the fact of the matter is that God cares for those men and women and children that are in bondage to these governments and these oppressive regimes in that region, and he wants them to have an opportunity to hear the truth too. And I just believe that he's shaking all of those things to make that happen. I don't think this is about
Yeah.
necessarily he wants that leader over that leader, or this nation over that nation. He's looking at all those individuals and all those different nations, and he is going to break the bonds that have kept them all these many years and give them an opportunity to hear and to know the truth. And that's already happening.
Yeah, and I just, it is amazing how much God is revealing, and it's for all of us and for the entire world. I mean, we see it a lot in the United States, but I mean, God is working throughout the country and exposing things that people had no idea about before. I mean,
Right.
it's amazing. It is. I say this a lot, and I do mean it. It's amazing to be here and be chosen by God, to be and live in a time such as this. I mean, some days it's like not so good, but in other days it is amazing to be here and be a part of it and to see how God is just absolutely miraculously unfolding everything that he said he would do.
Well, we need to work our spiritual muscles right now, while we have an opportunity to kind of get them in shape, because there's some stranger days coming.
Stranger days
If we
coming.
if we're living in the time we think we are, there's some
Yeah.
stranger days coming, and we need to be prepared for that. I, on a personal level, locally here with the congregation, see things and hear things and, get impressions and just feel like there's things you go through now because you got to work those muscles out to prepare them for what's coming later. And
Absolutely.
I think that that's what's going on to the body at large. God's doing some things, and we need to be prepared, equipped, ready to meet the opportunities as they arise. If on Iran, for instance, if that regime were to collapse, it's not going to be just about building up the economy. It's going to be about going in and have an opportunity to speak to the man, the woman, and the child about what's true, and what's holy. So anyway, I think that's what's behind all of this.
Tim said, "Thanks, Bill and Susan. I always learn at least a few things watching this show. So we're glad that you do."
So you learned that Susan is in therapy, and I'll just playing. I'm just playing.
Oh gosh. Now our last topic of the hour is about a survey that came out. Now I don't really put my trust and faith in these surveys, but this one seemed a little bit like something I wanted to bring up. It's a Pew Research Center. They asked approximately 9,900 people a series of questions about America. Most Americans polled agreed that the United States stand above all other countries, which is great to hear. But it was like 24% thought that way, or that it is one of the greatest countries along with others. Now, I know Brandon has some statistics that we can put on the screen too. And that number soared when the survey group was limited to young liberal Americans. I guess this was, to me, is kind of the most disturbing, but stuff I think that we already knew. And that is that from ages 19 to 29, in that age group, 47% of Democrat and Democrat-leaning people preferred other countries over the United States, while 19% of Republicans within the same age group agreed. And the poll also showed that 36% of this age group say other countries are greater than the United States. It's so disappointing to hear that and to know that young people are being brainwashed into believing that this isn't a good country, or it isn't the country they thought it was, or because they hear so much of Bernie Sanders and AOC and Tlaib and Ilhan Omar and all these quote unquote leaders of the Democrat and Independent Party, whatever Bernie is this day. But to believe that garbage, and I kind of think, what can we do? We talk about homeschool. We talk about not letting kids go to liberal colleges. Is there anything else that we can do? Because if we talk about it and we do nothing, nothing's going to change.
Well, I'm gonna put on my American hat for just a minute if I can. I read something just the other day that the among Bernie supporters, as far as a vocation, the vast majority of those who support Bernie are teachers, or they're in the education field. And so people who are in the education field, if this is their mindset, then you know what they're doing in these classrooms, which is why I will not turn my children over to those people. I will not let them indoctrinate them. Their minds are very fertile, especially when they're in those formative years. And what child, what young person is not going to respond favorably to a myth that I'll give you whatever it is you think you need. I will give you what you want. You need to have free education. You need to have free health care and all this kind of stuff. And that's all they hear. They have no frame of reference for reality. So they hear these things, they buy into them, and they think they're real. And particularly when you've got a generation when, I'm going to say this and probably offend some, but when you've got a generation at large who do not know what it means to suffer, who do not know what it means to go through a very difficult time. They have no comprehension of it. I will say of my generation, you and I, our generation compared to our grandparents, we have no comprehension of what suffering is all about. We had it good. But if we had it good compared to them, then this generation that's coming up now, they have no connection to any kind of suffering in anything they think they're suffering with, their cell phone won't work,
yeah, exactly.
or something like that.
Yeah.
So when you have that kind of a field to sow this poisonous seed into, I'm not surprised at all that it's going to bear its fruit. Now wearing my American hat, all these kids that say these things, that all these other countries are greater, I say, let's put their backside on a plane and fly them over there and let them
Absolutely.
stay over there for a little while just to see how great and wonderful it is.
Mhm.
Now, obviously, that's not going to happen because, they never leave their mother's basement unless it's to protest. But,
Right.
anyway. But that's what's going on. You've got, well, let me say this, and this is I can't remember the exact verse. It's in the book of Ezekiel. I want to say it's in chapter 16. It is actually talking about God's people, Israel, and then he makes this comparison between them and the people of Sodom, and actually says, and I'm paraphrasing this, that the people of Sodom, they're not nearly as bad as you guys are. Here was their problem, though. It wasn't the thing that we relate to Sodom, the sodomy and the homosexuality and those kinds of things. He says that that's a byproduct of their real problem. The real problem was that they had fullness of bread, they had idleness of time. They had plenty, and they had plenty to eat, and they had plenty of time on their hands. And because they had that working against them, then it produced all these other things. So what I'm getting at here is that's where we're at as a culture right now. We have fullness of bread, we have idleness of time, and those kinds of things work against us. We get
Yep.
so accustomed to the blessing that we forget where those blessings came from. We come to expect them, and it leads to all other kinds of things. So that's what's going on.
Well, it's also amazing too. There's some Project Veritas dropped something today on Bernie Sanders, and to hear what's going on with Bernie Sanders, the thing that came out today was a field operations field manager or whatever for the campaign, and he was saying, cussing a lot, so I won't repeat exactly what he said, but he said, if Bernie doesn't get the nominee, we're going to burn Milwaukee down. And if, with the Trump supporters, are we ever going to be able to sort of re-educate these people to reality, if when Bernie gets in? And I think one of the things that probably the worst thing about Bernie Sanders, we was talking about in 1972, I think it was, he wrote an essay. And I don't want to get too graphic, but he wrote an essay about a woman who was being raped by 3 men at one time. It was a fantasy that she was having. That to me is disgusting, from coming especially from a person who likes to claim that the Republican Party are anti-women, and then you have a 1972 article, and even Snopes said yes, it's true, he wrote this article. So my point too is, how could somebody who calls himself a Christian, you know, vote for somebody like that? When you go and you see what he's actually done, and there's more. I mean, he's more of a communist than he is anything. So I hope people start to wake up and see who sort of is coming to at like the survey, this is what people are drawn to for whatever reason, and we've got to wake those people up that you shouldn't be drawn to that's not good, that it's not healthy, it's not normal. Of course, we don't have normal anymore, but I mean, it's just not something that is beneficial for the country, and it's
Well,
a hard thing to do.
the generation of Iranians that were applauding the arrival of the Ayatollah Khomeini back in 1979 and the overrunning of the U.S. Embassy and the capture of the 52 American hostages and those who were chanting death to America 40 years ago, their children have lived under the consequence of all of that. And now they're the ones that are saying death to Khomeini. They're the ones that are trying and struggling and wanting to be free right now. So anyone who's lived under that nonsense doesn't want it.
Yeah.
It's only the people who think this and they think it's that, and they're just mad at what is around them and wanting to blame everybody else for their problems, what have you, always looking to burn something down. It's their children that'll be raised up later to come against those ideals and to overthrow those oppressive type governments.
Yeah, they actually, it's like hell on earth. If that's a good description. I think what's going on with the government of Iran and what those people are living under and have been living under, and in other countries too. It's very sad to see. Well, we have run out of time. So glad that we were able to come on together today and bring you the show. And hopefully, we'll keep everybody well. And we'll be back again next week for another show. But we really appreciate all your comments and your support. Please share this with everybody. Bill, any last words you want to say? Or
I think I flapped my gums enough for today.
okay. All right. So, everybody, thank you so much. Until next time, God bless you. Take care.
All right, bye bye.